Great Hall of Axis Prime stretched for nearly a kilometer in every direction, its walls curved upward like the inside of a shell, covered with the flags and symbols of 47 spacefaring civilizations. Floating platforms carried delegates from species that breathe different atmospheres, and translation devices hummed constantly as hundreds of voices spoke in dozens of languages. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the central podium, a small figure in a plain gray uniform. She was 63 years old, with silver hair pulled back tight and eyes that had seen too much. Behind her, a holographic display waited to show the evidence her team had spent 5 years gathering. The Galactic Concordant Assembly met only once every decade for full sessions. Getting humanity on the speaking schedule had taken 3 years of diplomatic pressure and the calling in of every favor humanity had earned since first contact 2 centuries ago. Elena looked out at the gathered delegates. The Keth sat in their elevated section, their four-armed bodies wrapped in ceremonial robes that cost more than a human starship. The Sirvani floated in their water-filled pods, their tentacles moving in patterns that showed their boredom. The Torvans stood at attention in their military uniforms, their reptilian faces showing nothing. These were the elder races. They had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years before humanity learned to make fire. They had seen species rise and fall. They had fought wars that burned entire star systems and signed treaties that shaped the fate of trillions. And they did not want to hear what Elena Vasquez had to say. "Honored delegates," Elena began, her voice carried by the translation systems to every corner of the hall. "I come before you today not to ask for trade agreements or territorial negotiations. I come with a warning that concerns every living being in this galaxy." She touched the controls and the hologram behind her came to life. It showed a region of space that most species avoided, the dead zone between galaxies where no stars burned and no planets orbited. Empty, silent, forgotten. 3 decades ago, a human exploration vessel named the Wanderer entered the intergalactic void. They were searching for resources, for scientific data, for anything that might help our young civilization grow stronger. Elena paused. What they found was something else entirely. The hologram shifted, showing sensor readings that made several delegates lean forward despite themselves. Energy signatures on a scale that defied easy measurement. Metallic structures stretching for thousands of kilometers. Ships, if they could be called ships, each one the size of a small moon. "We call them the harvesters," Elena said. "Our scientists estimate there are approximately 12 million of them. They are currently dormant, but our analysis of their power systems suggests they will activate within 30 years. A ripple of murmurs spread through the assembly. The Kith delegate, a massive figure named Torvik, made a dismissive gesture with two of his arms. "Ambassador Vasquez," Torvik said, his voice booming through the hall. "Humanity has been part of the galactic community for barely 2 centuries. In that time, your species has shown a remarkable talent for seeing threats where none exist. You fought 3 wars among yourselves before you even reached your own moon." Laughter echoed from several sections of the hall. Elena kept her face calm. "With respect, Delegate Torvik, our history of conflict is precisely why we recognize danger when we see it." She changed the hologram again, showing detailed scans of the dormant machines. These structures matched descriptions found in the oldest records of the precursor civilization, a species that vanished 12 million years ago. According to those records, the harvesters are responsible for cyclical extinction events. Every 50,000 years, they emerge from the void and systematically eliminate all advanced life in the galaxy. The Sirvani delegate, a creature named Mollusk Prime, spoke through a translator device. "The precursor records are myths and legends. No serious scholar considers them historical fact." "We did not consider them fact either," Elena replied, "until we found the harvesters exactly where the records said they would be. Until we confirmed that their activation cycle matches the timeline described. Until we discovered that the last great extinction event occurred precisely 49,970 years ago." She let that number hang in the air. 30 years, she repeated. "That is what we have. 30 years to prepare for an enemy that has destroyed every advanced civilization in this galaxy's history. 30 years to build weapons, to train soldiers, to develop strategies. 30 years if we start today." Elena outlined her proposal. Full military cooperation between all concordate species, shared technology and research, resource pooling on a scale never before attempted, the construction of defensive stations, warships, and weapons designed specifically to fight an enemy that had never been defeated. Humanity cannot do this alone, she admitted. We are too few, too young, too weak. But together, all 47 species working as one, we have a chance, a real chance to break the cycle and ensure that our children and our children's children will live to see the stars. She finished speaking and waited. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Torvik of the Keth rose to his full height, nearly 3 meters tall, and addressed the assembly. I have listened to the human ambassador with patience, he said. I have examined the evidence she presents, and I must tell this assembly what I see. A young species, desperate for attention and resources, manufacturing a crisis to elevate their status among their betters. More murmurs, these ones approving. The precursor records are incomplete and contradictory. The sensor data could show anything. Natural phenomena, ancient debris, automated mining equipment left behind by forgotten civilizations. The interpretation that humanity offers is the most dramatic possible reading of ambiguous evidence. Torvik turned to face Elena directly. Ambassador Vasquez, your species has been trying to prove its worth to this assembly since the day you achieved faster-than-light travel. You have offered us nothing of value, no unique resources, no advanced technology, no cultural achievements that we do not already possess in greater measure. This warning is simply another attempt to make yourselves seem important. The laughter was louder this time. Elena felt heat rising in her cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. Delegate Torvik, I did not come here seeking importance. I came here because 12 million killing machines are going to wake up in 30 years. And when they do, they will not care whether we are Keth or human, Sirvani or Torvan. They will kill us all. If they exist at all, Torvik replied, which I very much doubt. The vote was called. Elena watched the numbers appear on the display, species by species. Against humanity's proposal, 44. In favor, 3, the Vellani, the Kortoth, and the Marani, all minor species with little influence. The motion to prepare for the harvester threat was tabled indefinitely. After the session ended, Elena remained at the podium while the hall emptied around her. Her aide, a young man named David Chen, approached carefully. Ambassador, the transport is ready. Elena nodded slowly. She looked up at the great dome above her, painted with images of the Concordate's founding. Dozens of species joining hands and tentacles and claws in a gesture of unity. A beautiful lie. David, send a message to Earth. Priority 1. Tell them the vote failed. Yes, Ambassador. Should I request another session? We could try again and... No. Elena's voice was firm. We gave them their chance. We came here with open hands, offering to work together, asking for nothing but partnership and survival. They laughed at us. She began walking toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the emptying hall. We're withdrawing from the Concordate, completely. Close the borders, recall all diplomatic staff, end all trade agreements. From this moment forward, humanity stands alone. David struggled to keep up with her. Ambassador, the Council will never approve such a drastic... The Council will approve it, because I'm going to tell them what I saw here today. Not just dismissal, David. Contempt. They look at us and see children playing at being adults. They think our warnings are tantrums, our fears are fantasies, our science is primitive guesswork. Elena stopped at the exit and turned to face her aide. In 30 years, they're going to learn how wrong they were. And when that day comes, humanity needs to be ready, with or without them. She walked out of the Great Hall of Axis Prime for the last time. 3 days later, the human ambassador delivered a final statement to the Concordate. It was broadcast to every member species, recorded for history, and then humanity's channels went silent. We came to you as partners, Elena Vasquez said, her face calm and her voice steady. We offered our hands in friendship, our minds in cooperation, our resources in preparation for a common threat. You refused us. You mocked us. You sent us away like beggars at your gates." She paused and something cold entered her eyes. "We will not come again. We will not ask again. We will not beg again. Humanity will face what is coming on our own terms, with our own strength, by our own will. And when the harvesters wake, when your worlds burn and your fleets crumble and your empires fall, remember this moment. Remember that you had a choice. Remember that we warned you." The transmission ended. Human space went dark. The galaxy barely noticed. Trade routes adjusted around the missing human systems. Diplomatic discussions continued without human input. The elder races congratulated themselves on dealing with the annoying upstarts, and life went on as it always had. On 1,000 human worlds, a different kind of life began. Factories that had made consumer goods switched to military production. Universities that had taught art and philosophy began training engineers and soldiers. Families that had planned for peaceful futures started preparing their children for war. Elena Vasquez returned to Earth and walked into a meeting with the United Human Council. She presented her report, her recommendations, and her resignation. "I've done what I can in the diplomatic arena," she told them. "Now it's time for others to take over. We have 30 years. Use them well." She lived long enough to see the first of the new warships launch from the orbital shipyards, sleek vessels designed not for exploration or trade, but for killing. She died at the age of 91, surrounded by grandchildren who had grown up knowing only one truth. The harvesters were coming, and humanity would face them alone. Her last words were recorded and played at her funeral, broadcast across every human world. "They called us children. They laughed at our fears. Let them laugh. In the end, we will show them what humanity can do when we have no choice but to fight. And we will not fight like children. We will fight like the only species in this galaxy that truly understands what survival means." The countdown had begun. 28 years passed like water through open fingers. The galaxy changed in ways both large and small. The Dominion of Keth expanded its borders by 30%, absorbing 3 minor species into its empire. The Sirvani Collective developed new forms of art that were celebrated across 100 worlds. The Torvan Empire fought 2 small wars and won both decisively. Human space remained silent. At first, other species sent probes to investigate. The probes never returned. Then they sent ships with diplomatic messages. The ships were turned away at the border by automated defense platforms that had not existed before. Eventually, the Concordat declared human space a closed zone and warned its citizens to stay away. Theories spread about what had happened. Some said humanity had collapsed into civil war. Others claimed a plague had wiped them out. A few suggested they had simply given up and retreated into primitive isolation. Whatever the truth, the elder races agreed on one thing. Humanity had proven itself unworthy of galactic civilization. The trade routes that once passed through human systems were rerouted. The diplomatic seats that humans once held were given to other species. The warnings that Elena Vasquez had delivered were forgotten, buried in archives that no one bothered to access. Life went on. Kathira was 12 years old when humanity closed its borders. She grew up in the floating cities of Sirvani Prime, surrounded by water and light and the gentle songs of her people. Her parents were artists, creating sculptures that moved with the currents, and they expected her to follow the same path. But Kathira was different. Where other Sirvani children played games and learned to shape beauty, she studied the stars. She collected data from old expeditions. She read reports that others considered boring or irrelevant, and she became obsessed with a species that everyone else had forgotten. By the time she was 30, Kathira had become the galaxy's foremost expert on humanity, a distinction that meant nothing, since no one cared about humans anymore. She had analyzed every piece of human art, literature, and scientific work that remained in Concordat archives. She had interviewed the last surviving diplomats who had worked with human representatives. She had studied the sensor data from Elena Vasquez's presentation so many times that she could recite the numbers from memory. And she believed. The harvesters were real. The threat was real. And humanity had not collapsed or retreated. They had been preparing. "You're wasting your career," her supervisor told her repeatedly. "No one wants to hear about extinct primitives and mythical threats. Focus on something productive." Kathira ignored him. She continued her research, publishing papers that no one read, giving lectures to empty rooms, sending reports to officials who deleted them without looking. Then the readings started coming in. The first anomalies appeared at the edge of the galactic rim, in the dead space where no one ever looked. Energy signatures that matched nothing in any database. Movement where nothing should move. The Torvain patrol fleet, 12 heavy cruisers and 50 support vessels, was dispatched to investigate. They sent one final transmission before going silent. Contact with unknown vessels. Massive scale. They're not responding to any static. Silence. Nothing. Kathira brought the readings to the new Galactic Assembly, now expanded to 52 member species. She stood where Elena Vasquez had stood nearly 3 decades earlier and presented her analysis. The energy signatures match the data from the human presentation, she said. The harvesters are waking up. We have perhaps 2 years before they reach populated space. The response was different this time. Not laughter, but fear disguised as denial. The Torvan fleet likely encountered pirates or rebels, the Keth delegate said. There is no evidence of these harvesters. 62 ships do not vanish because of pirates, Kathira replied. And the energy readings are exactly what Ambassador Vasquez predicted. She was right. We need to start preparing immediately. Preparing how? The Sirvani representative asked. Even if this threat is real, we have no weapons designed to fight it, no strategies to employ, no understanding of what we face. 2 years is not enough time. Then we need to contact the humans, Kathira said. They've had 28 years to prepare. They may have developed weapons, defenses, strategies. They tried to warn us and we didn't listen. Perhaps if we approach them now, admit we were wrong. Absolutely not. The Keth delegate's voice was sharp. The Dominion will not beg primitives for assistance. If this threat exists, we will handle it ourselves, as we have handled every threat for 10,000 years. The motion to contact humanity was defeated. The motion to investigate the Torvan disappearance was passed, with a single scout ship assigned to the task. The motion to begin military preparations was tabled for further discussion. Kathira left the assembly chamber feeling the same despair that Elena Vasquez must have felt all those years ago. That night she made a decision. Her personal vessel was small, designed for research expeditions, not long-distance travel. She modified it as best she could, adding extra fuel cells and supplies, and plotted a course for human space. The journey would take 3 weeks. She might be captured, killed, or simply turned away. But she had to try. The border of human space was marked by automated platforms that scanned every approaching vessel. Kathira expected to be destroyed the moment she entered sensor range. Instead, she received a transmission. Unknown vessel, you are approaching restricted human territory. State your identity and purpose. I am Kathira of the Sirvani Collective. I am a scientist. I have spent my life studying your species in the harvester threat. I believe you were right, and I have come to ask for help. A long pause followed. Then, proceed to the following coordinates. Any deviation will result in immediate destruction. She followed the instructions precisely, her tentacles trembling on the controls. The coordinates led her through a maze of defense platforms, sensor networks, and weapon systems that made the Concordate's best military installations look like children's toys. She passed shipyards where vessels unlike anything she had ever seen were being constructed. Angular, brutal shapes designed for one purpose only. Finally, she was directed to dock at a massive station orbiting a barren moon. Armed humans in combat armor escorted her through corridors lined with displays showing tactical data, production schedules, and casualty projections. Everyone she passed moved with purpose, their faces showing the kind of grim determination that came from years of preparation for something terrible. They brought her to a command center at the heart of the station. There, seated at a desk covered with holographic displays, was an elderly human male. His hair was white, his face lined with age, and his eyes held the weight of decades. I am Admiral Marcus Chen, he said. I remember you. Not personally, but your name has appeared in intelligence reports. You're the Sirvani who kept writing papers about us. The only one in the whole Concordat who seemed to care. Kathira struggled to find words. I tried to make them listen. After what happened to the Torvan fleet, I thought they might finally understand, but they didn't. Chen nodded slowly. They never do. That's what my grandmother used to say. She was at the assembly when Ambassador Vasquez made her speech. She said the looks on their faces, the contempt, the amusement, it was worse than hatred. At least hatred acknowledges you as a threat. They looked at us like we were insects making noise. Your grandmother? Elena Vasquez. She was my grandmother. Chen smiled slightly. She died when I was 19. Made me promise to remember this day. The day someone from the Concordat finally came to us with respect instead of demands. She said it would happen eventually. She was usually right about things like that. Kathira felt her hearts racing. Then you'll help? You'll share your preparations, your weapons? If we work together, you're 28 years too late to help us build. Chen interrupted. His voice was not cruel, just tired. What we have, we built alone, with our own resources and our own hands. Every ship in our fleet represents sacrifices your species cannot imagine. Families who gave up comfort for the war effort. Children who grew up knowing they might die before they turned 30. Scientists who spent their entire careers developing weapons they hoped would never be used. He stood and walked to a viewpoint that looked out over the shipyard. Dozens of vessels moved in precise formation, running drills and exercises. 10,000 ships, he said. That's what we've built. 10,000 warships, each one designed specifically to fight the harvesters. We've studied every piece of data we could find, run millions of simulations, tested weapons against every possible defense we could imagine. We've done everything we could to be ready. Is it enough? Kathira asked quietly. Chen turned to face her. Honestly, I don't know. The harvesters have destroyed every civilization in galactic history. 12 million ships, each one the size of a city. We're sending 10,000 against them. The math isn't good. Then why won't you ask for help? The Concordat has fleets. Not as prepared as yours, but numbers might. Numbers won't matter. Chen shook his head. Throwing unprepared ships against the harvesters will just get more people killed. The Concordat's fleets are designed to fight each other. Territorial disputes, resource conflicts, political posturing. They have no concept of what's coming. By the time they understand, it will be too late. He returned to his desk and activated a holographic display. It showed the galactic map, with the harvester approach marked in red. They'll hit Keth space first, then Torvan, then Sirvani. The Concordat will mobilize, throw everything they have at the enemy, and lose. By my estimates, 12 species will be completely extinct within the first month. Another 20 will lose their homeworlds within 6 months. Kathira stared at the projections in horror. And humanity? We'll wait, watch, learn. Chen's voice was cold. When the Concordat's fleets are gone, and the elder races are begging for mercy, we'll strike, not to save them. It'll be too late for that, but to end it, to destroy the harvesters once and for all, so that no species ever has to face this cycle again. You would let billions die? Trillions. We tried to save them. Chen met her eyes without flinching. 28 years ago, we begged them to listen. We offered everything we had, asked for nothing but cooperation. They laughed at us, called us children, sent us away like servants who had spoken out of turn. He paused. We don't owe them anything. Kathira wanted to argue, to plead, to convince him that mercy was possible. But she saw the truth in his eyes. This was not cruelty. This was mathematics. Humanity had calculated the cost of saving the Concordat and decided it was too high. They would spend their strength on victory, not rescue. What happens to me? She asked finally. Chen considered her for a long moment. You can stay. Watch what happens. Learn why we made the choices we made. When it's over, if there's an over, you can tell the survivors our story. Someone should remember the truth, not whatever version the Concordat invents. Through the viewpoint, Kathira watched the human fleet continue its endless drills. Ships moved in patterns she didn't understand, preparing for a battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy. They're going to wake up soon, Chen said quietly. Days, maybe weeks. When they do, the galaxy will burn. And when the fire dies down, humanity will be there to finish it. He looked at her with something that might have been sympathy. Welcome to the end of the world, Kathira. I hope you're ready. She wasn't. No one could be ready for what was coming, but she stayed anyway, because somewhere in the cold equations of human strategy, she hoped to find a spark of the mercy that the galaxy desperately needed. That spark would be a long time coming. The harvesters emerged from the void like a tide of metal and fire. Kithira watched from the observation deck of Admiral Chen's flagship, the Prometheus, as sensor data flooded across every screen. The numbers were beyond comprehension. 12 million vessels, each one between 50 and 200 kilometers in length, moving in perfect formation toward the galactic rim. They did not accelerate or decelerate. They simply moved, steady and unstoppable, at a speed that would bring them to the first inhabited systems within 72 hours. They're beautiful in a terrible way, Chen said, standing beside her. Perfect geometric shapes, no wasted space, no unnecessary components. Whoever built them knew exactly what they wanted, machines designed to end civilizations. Who did build them? Kathira asked. We don't know. The precursor records don't say. Maybe the harvesters themselves don't remember anymore. Maybe it doesn't matter. What matters is that they're here and they're hungry. The first concordant response came within hours. The Dominion of Keth, proud rulers of the largest territory in the galaxy, assembled their legendary Grand Fleet. 2,000 warships, veterans of a dozen conflicts, commanded by admirals who had never known defeat. They formed a defensive line at the edge of Keth space and waited. The harvesters did not slow down. They did not attempt communication. They simply arrived. Kithira watched the battle unfold on the Prometheus's tactical displays. The Keth fleet opened fire with everything they had: plasma cannons, antimatter torpedoes, gravitational disruptors. Their weapons were the most advanced in the Concordat, tested and refined over 10,000 years of warfare. The harvesters absorbed the attacks like water-absorbing drops of rain. Their shields held. Their hulls remained intact. And then they returned fire. Beams of energy that defied analysis cut through the Keth fleet. Ships that had taken years to build were destroyed in seconds. Commanders who had led victories across a dozen star systems died before they could issue orders. The Grand Fleet, 2,000 ships, the pride of the Dominion, lasted exactly 6 hours and 14 minutes. When it was over, not a single Keth vessel remained. 3 billion dead, Chen said quietly. The Dominion's outer colonies, military stations, and defensive platforms, all gone. The harvesters didn't even slow down. The news spread across the galaxy like a shockwave. The Keth, the mightiest of the elder races, the rulers who had laughed at humanity's warnings, had been annihilated in less than a day. Panic gripped the Concordat. Emergency sessions were called. Fleets were mobilized. Diplomats sent frantic messages in every direction, begging for alliances, resources, anything that might help. The Sirvani Collective tried a different approach. They were not warriors. They were artists, philosophers, seekers of beauty and truth. They believed that any intelligent species could be reasoned with, that communication was the answer to all conflicts. They sent a diplomatic vessel to meet the harvesters with messages of peace in every known language, including mathematical sequences that any advanced civilization should recognize as a universal greeting. The harvesters destroyed the vessel mid-transmission. The last thing the Sirvani diplomats sent was a single word. Why? There was no answer. The harvesters did not speak. They did not negotiate. They did not explain. They simply killed. The Torvan Empire, the warrior race that had built its civilization on conquest and military honor, chose a different path. They did not stand and fight. They did not try to negotiate. They ran. Torvan fleets abandoned their outer colonies without firing a shot. Millions of civilians were left behind as military vessels retreated toward the galactic core. The Torvan High Command calculated that survival was more important than honor, and honor could be rebuilt after the threat passed. They were not wrong about the math, but the harvesters were faster than they expected. Within a week, the galactic rim was burning. Species that had existed for thousands of years were reduced to refugees. Worlds that had been centers of culture and learning became tombs. The Concordat's carefully maintained order collapsed into chaos as every species fought for survival. And through it all, humanity waited. "Why aren't we moving?" Kithira demanded during one of the daily briefings. "Every hour that passes, more people die. Your fleet is ready. Why are you just watching?" Chen looked at her with eyes that had seen too many tactical projections. "Because we can't save them. Not yet. We move now, we get destroyed along with everyone else. We have one chance, one single chance to end this. We can't waste it on a rescue mission that would fail. You call it rescue, I call it decency. Decency doesn't win wars." Chen pulled up a holographic display. "Look at this. The harvesters aren't just attacking randomly. They're following a pattern, starting at the rim, spiraling inward, destroying everything in their path. They'll hit the galactic core last. That's where we strike." "The core? That's the most populated region in... That's where the Harvester Command Nexus will be. Every piece of data we've gathered, every simulation we've run, points to the same conclusion. The Harvesters aren't independent. They're controlled by a central intelligence, a coordination node that gives them their terrible efficiency. Destroy that node, and the entire armada falls apart." Kithira stared at the projection. "You want to let them reach the core? You want to let them destroy everything?" "I want to end them." Chen's voice was hard. "Forever, so that no species, no civilization, no child born 1,000,000 years from now ever has to face this horror again. That's worth sacrifice. That's worth waiting." The weeks that followed were the worst of Kithira's life. She watched from the Prometheus as world after world fell. She saw the death toll climb into the billions, then the tens of billions. She heard the final transmissions of species that had existed since before humanity's ancestors climbed down from trees. Desperate pleas for help that went unanswered. Final declarations of love and hope that echoed into silence. 12 species went extinct in the first month. Their names became entries in a growing list that Kithira maintained in her quarters. The Kethvar, the Morlani, the Seath, the Outer Torvan, the Deep Sirvani, species that had contributed art, science, philosophy, and music to the galactic community, reduced to memories and ashes. The Sirvani homeworld fell on the 43rd day. Kethira's parents were there. She received no final message from them. The communication networks had been destroyed hours before the harvesters arrived. She simply watched the sensor data as her birth planet was consumed. And then she went to her quarters and wept until her body could not produce any more tears. Chen found her there, hours later. He said nothing. He simply sat beside her and waited until she was ready to speak. "You could have saved them," she whispered. "Your fleet is strong. You could have..." "Saved Sirvani Prime and lost the war," Chen finished. "I know. I've run the numbers 1,000 times. Every scenario where we intervene early ends the same way. We slow the harvesters down, we save a few million lives, and then we're destroyed along with everyone else. The cycle continues. The next civilization rises, reaches the stars, and dies screaming, just like all the ones before." "How do you live with it? The knowledge that you could have done something?" Chen was quiet for a long moment. "I don't live with it. Not really. None of us do. We just endure. We carry the weight because someone has to. Because the alternative, fighting now, feeling righteous, and failing, means that everyone who ever comes after us faces the same impossible choice." He stood and walked to the door. "The harvesters will reach the core in approximately 6 weeks. When they do, we move. Until then, we watch. We learn. We prepare. And we carry the weight." He left Kithira alone with her grief. The human fleet spent those weeks in constant activity. Ships ran drills at all hours, testing weapon systems, refining tactics, preparing for a battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Kithira threw herself into the work, helping where she could, learning the human way of war. She discovered that humans did not fight like the concordate species. They did not seek glory or honor. They did not celebrate victories or mourn defeats. They simply worked, methodically, relentlessly, with a cold efficiency that reminded her uncomfortably of the harvesters themselves. "We learned from the best," a human officer told her when she mentioned this. "We studied every war humanity ever fought, every defeat, every victory. We learned that emotions get people killed. So we put them away. We became the weapon we needed to be. And after, when the war is over, do you put the emotions back? The officer smiled sadly. Ask me if we survive. On the 57th day, the harvesters reached the galactic core. The last defenders of the Concordat, a ragged fleet of survivors from a dozen species, made their final stand at the Axis Prime Station. They fought bravely. They died quickly. The great hall where Elena Vasquez had delivered her warning was consumed by fire, along with the flags and symbols of 47 civilizations. Admiral Chen gathered his officers on the bridge of the Prometheus. Kithaira stood among them, the only non-human in the room. The Harvester Command Nexus has been located, Chen announced. It's at the center of their formation, protected by approximately 3 million vessels. That's our target. He looked around the room at the faces of men and women who had trained their entire lives for this moment. We have 10,000 ships. They have 3 million guarding the Nexus alone. The math isn't good. Most of us are going to die. But if we succeed, if we destroy that Nexus, the Harvesters will fall. The cycle ends. The galaxy survives. He straightened his uniform and moved toward the command chair. All ships, prepare for jump. It's time to show the galaxy what humanity can do. The fleet moved forward, 10,000 vessels against an armada that had destroyed every civilization in history. Kathira watched the stars blur as the Prometheus accelerated toward destiny, and she wondered if any of them would live to see what came next. She hoped so, but hope, she had learned, was not enough. Only humanity's cold, calculated rage would determine the outcome now. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, 10,000 warships arranged in a pattern that had been drilled a million times. Before them stretched the Harvester Armada, an ocean of metal and death that filled every sensor display with contacts too numerous to count. Kathira stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, watching Admiral Chen study the tactical displays with calm, cold eyes. Around her, human officers worked their stations with mechanical precision, their voices low and steady despite the impossible odds they faced. All ships begin attack pattern Alpha 7, Chen ordered. Weapons free. May fortune favor the bold. The battle began. Human vessels surged forward in waves, their weapons blazing against Harvester shields. The first exchange was catastrophic. Ships that had been built over years of sacrifice were torn apart in seconds. Explosions bloomed across the void like deadly flowers, each one representing hundreds of human lives lost. But the humans did not break. They did not retreat. They adapted. Harvester shield frequency identified, a tactical officer reported, adjusting weapon harmonics. The second wave of attacks hit differently. Human weapons, designed over 30 years of research, found weaknesses in Harvester defenses that the Concordat had never discovered. Shields flickered. Whole sections cracked. For the first time in recorded history, Harvester vessels began to die. But for every Harvester destroyed, humanity lost dozens of ships. The math was brutal. Chen had estimated that they would lose 90% of their fleet before reaching the command nexus. Within the first hour, that estimate seemed optimistic. Task Force Bravo is gone, an officer reported, his voice betraying no emotion. Task Force Delta at 40% strength. Task Force Echo requesting permission to... He paused, listening to his earpiece. Task Force Echo destroyed. Chen nodded, adjusting the tactical display. Redirect surviving elements to support Task Force Gamma. We need to punch through Sector 7. Kathira watched the battle unfold with a mixture of horror and admiration. The humans fought without fear, without hesitation, without hope. They simply executed their training, following protocols designed for exactly this scenario, sacrificing themselves methodically to achieve their objective. How can they do this? She asked Captain Yuki Tanaka, Chen's second in command. How can they keep fighting when they know they're going to die? Tanaka didn't take her eyes off her displays. Because dying isn't the worst thing that can happen. Failing is. Every person on these ships grew up knowing this day would come. They made peace with death a long time ago. What they can't make peace with is letting the cycle continue. The Prometheus shuddered as a harvester beam glanced off its shields. Damage reports flooded in. Hull breaches on 3 decks. Weapon systems at 80%. Engines still operational. We can't take many more of those. the damage control officer warned. We don't need many more, Chen replied. We just need to reach the Nexus. The human fleet pushed deeper into the Harvester formation, leaving a trail of debris and dead ships behind them. The Harvesters, for all their terrible power, seemed confused by the human tactics. They were designed to face fleets that broke and ran when casualties mounted. Humanity did neither. Phase 2, Chen ordered. Activate the infiltration teams. Kythera had learned about this part of the plan during her weeks on the Prometheus. Before the battle began, human special forces had been inserted into Harvester-controlled space in stealth vessels. Their mission? Plant devices that would introduce corrupted code into the Harvester network. It was a desperate gamble. The Harvesters were ancient machines with security protocols developed over millions of years. The chance of success was calculated at less than 5%. But humanity had spent 30 years preparing for this moment, and they had found something in the precursor records that no one else had noticed. The Harvesters were not immune to their own weapons. If their coordination could be disrupted, if their perfect synchronization could be broken, they would turn on each other. Across the battlefield, hidden operatives activated their devices. For a long, terrible moment, nothing happened. Then slowly at first, and then with increasing chaos, Harvester vessels began to change course. Their perfect formations broke apart. Ships that had been attacking humanity suddenly turned their weapons on their neighbors. The ocean of death became a churning storm of confusion. It's working, Chen breathed, the first sign of emotion Kythera had seen from him. By God, it's actually working. The human fleet surged forward through the chaos, exploiting gaps that hadn't existed moments before. The path to the command nexus began to open. Victory, impossible as it seemed, became conceivable. Then the Harvesters adapted. The infected vessels are being destroyed by their own kind, a tactical officer reported. The Nexus is isolating corrupted units and eliminating them. Coordination is being restored. Chen's moment of hope faded. How long? At current rate, 20 minutes before full synchronization is restored. Then we have 20 minutes to reach the Nexus and destroy it. Chen looked around the bridge. All ships, maximum speed, no evasive maneuvers, straight line to target. The order was suicide. Without evasive maneuvers, human vessels would be easy targets. But it was the only way to cover the remaining distance in time. The final charge began. Human ships died by the hundreds, then by the thousands. The Prometheus took hit after hit, its shields failing, its hull cracking, its weapons falling silent one by one. Around it, the remnants of humanity's fleet fought with desperate fury, buying every second with lives. Admiral Chen was on his feet, directing the battle with the calm of a man who had accepted his fate long ago. Then a harvester beam struck the bridge directly. Kythera was thrown across the room, her body slamming against a console. When she recovered, she saw chaos. Fires burning, officers dead or wounded, sparks flying from damaged systems, and Admiral Chen lying against the far wall, his uniform stained with blood. She crawled to him, her tentacles pulling her across the debris-covered floor. His eyes were open, but she could see the life fading from them. The Nexus, he whispered. We're almost there. Tanaka, Captain Tanaka. Yuki Tanaka appeared beside them, her face cut and bleeding but her eyes steady. I'm here, Admiral. You have command. Finish it. Whatever it takes, finish it. Chen's hand found Tanaka's and squeezed. My grandmother, she knew this day would come. She said humanity's gift wasn't our technology or our weapons. It was our stubbornness, our refusal to accept that anything was impossible. His breathing slowed, his grip weakened. Show them, he said, his voice barely audible. Show them what we can do. Then Admiral Marcus Chen, grandson of Elena Vasquez, commander of humanity's last hope, closed his eyes and was still. Tanaka took a moment, just one moment, to honor his passing. Then she stood, her face hard as stone, and took the command chair. All hands, this is Captain Tanaka. Admiral Chen has fallen. I have assumed command. Her voice carried across every surviving human ship. The Nexus is 3 kilometers ahead. We have 12 minutes before Harvester coordination is restored. Every ship that can still move, every weapon that can still fire, every person who can still breathe, You know what we have to do. She looked at the view screen, where the massive Harvester command nexus floated like a dark moon, surrounded by a swarm of protectors. Humanity sends its regards. The remaining human ships, fewer than 800 now, from an original fleet of 10,000, threw themselves at the nexus. They fought through the defensive perimeter, losing vessels with every passing second. Some ships, their weapons destroyed, rammed Harvester vessels directly, sacrificing their crews to clear a path. The Prometheus, battered and burning, led the final assault. Its main weapons were gone, but it still had torpedoes. It still had engines. It still had a crew willing to die. Targeting solution locked, the weapons officer reported, but our torpedoes can't penetrate the Nexus shields. We need to get closer. How close? Inside the shield perimeter. Point-blank range. Tanaka nodded. Helm, plot a collision course. All hands prepare for impact. Kythera understood what was happening. The Prometheus was going to ram the Nexus, detonating its torpedoes inside the shield perimeter. Everyone aboard would die. You don't have to do this, she said to Tanaka. There might be another way. There isn't. Tanaka's voice was gentle but firm. This is what we were built for. This is what we train for. This is why we exist. She paused, then added, You should get to an escape pod. Someone needs to survive. Someone needs to tell the story. I'm staying. Tanaka smiled, the first smile Kythera had ever seen from her. Then stay, and remember us well. The Prometheus accelerated toward the Nexus, its damaged engines screaming with effort. Harvester weapons pounded its hull, tearing through armor, killing crew, destroying everything. But the ship kept moving, kept pushing, kept fighting. They passed through the shield perimeter. Torpedoes armed, the weapons officer reported. Impact in 3, 2, 1. The Prometheus struck the Nexus and detonated every weapon it carried. Kythera should have died. She expected to die. But at the last moment, Tanaka had triggered an emergency protocol that sealed Kythera in a reinforced observation pod and ejected it from the ship. She watched through a tiny viewport as the Prometheus, her home for the past weeks, vanished in a ball of fire that consumed the Harvester command nexus. For a moment, nothing happened. Then across the entire battlefield, the Harvesters stopped. Their perfect coordination shattered. Their weapons fell silent. Their engines died. 12 million vessels, each one a terror that had destroyed civilizations, became floating hulks. Dead machines with no purpose, no direction, no will. The cycle was broken. Kythera floated in her escape pod, surrounded by the debris of the greatest battle in galactic history, and wept for the humans who had given everything so that others might live. The cost was beyond calculation. Of the 10,000 ships that had entered the battle, fewer than 800 had survived the fighting. Of those, only a handful had been close enough to the Nexus explosion to escape destruction. But they had won. For the first time in 12 million years, the Harvesters had been stopped. For the first time in galactic history, a civilization had faced the cycle of extinction and broken it. And the species that had done it, the primitive, paranoid, stubborn, impossible humans, had proven themselves worthy of the stars in the most terrible way imaginable. Kythera's pod drifted among the wreckage, its emergency beacon calling for rescue. She didn't know if anyone would answer. She didn't know what would happen next. She only knew that she had witnessed something extraordinary. The end of an ancient evil, paid for in human blood. The galaxy would never be the same. The galaxy was silent. For 3 days after the Battle of the Nexus, nothing moved. The surviving human vessels gathered their wounded, collected their dead, and waited. The Harvesters, 12 million vessels that had terrorized the stars, drifted lifelessly in the void. Their ancient mission ended, their terrible purpose finally spent. Kythera was recovered by a human rescue shuttle on the second day. They found her dehydrated, traumatized, but alive. The medics treated her wounds and gave her water and let her sleep in a quiet cabin while the fleet regrouped. When she woke, she learned the final count. Of humanity's fleet of 10,000 ships, 783 had survived. Of the crews who had fought in the battle, fewer than 200,000 remained alive, from an initial force of nearly 3 million. Admiral Chen was dead. Captain Tanaka was dead. Most of the command staff was dead. The survivors were led by a young commander named Rodriguez, a woman who had been a junior officer before the battle and now found herself in charge of what remained of humanity's military. The galaxy beyond human space was in ruins. 12 species were completely extinct. 23 more had lost their homeworlds. The Concordat had effectively ceased to exist, its administrative stations destroyed, its communication networks shattered, its member species scattered across the stars as refugees. But they were alive. Trillions of beings across hundreds of worlds were still breathing because humanity had done what no one else could do. The first Concordat ships began arriving at the edge of human space on the fourth day. They came slowly, cautiously, their weapons powered down and their shields lowered. They came not as the proud masters of the galaxy, but as survivors seeking shelter. Commander Rodriguez met them at the border. "We request permission to enter human territory," the Torvaean High Commander transmitted. His voice was broken, his ship damaged, his pride shattered. "We seek assistance." Rodriguez looked at the gathered representatives of the species that had mocked humanity, laughed at their warnings, sent them away like servants. For a long moment, she considered turning them away, letting them face the consequences of their arrogance alone. Then she remembered why they had fought. Not for revenge, not for vindication, but to end the cycle so that no species would ever face this horror again. "Permission granted," she said. "All ships seeking refuge are welcome in human space. We will provide what assistance we can." The recovery took years. Kythera became a bridge between humanity and the surviving Concordat species. She translated not just languages but perspectives, helping beings who had spent their lives looking down on humans understand what humanity had sacrificed for them. It was not easy. Many in the Concordat struggled to accept that they owed their survival to the species they had dismissed as primitive. Some clung to their pride, insisting that humanity had acted out of self-interest, that they had waited too long to intervene, that they bore responsibility for the deaths that could have been prevented. But most understood the truth. Humanity had tried to warn them. Humanity had offered partnership, cooperation, a chance to face the threat together. The Concordat had refused. The deaths that followed were not humanity's fault. They were the result of galactic arrogance, of ancient species too proud to listen to the voices of the young. The first joint assembly was held 1 year after the battle, on a station hastily constructed in neutral space. Representatives from 31 surviving species gathered to discuss the future. Humanity sent a delegation led by Commander Rodriguez, now promoted to Admiral, the highest-ranking military officer in human space. The Torvaean High Commander, the same one who had fled before the Harvesters and watched his empire crumble, rose to speak. "Before we discuss trade agreements or territorial boundaries or any of the matters that once seemed so important, I must address the question that haunts every species in this room." He turned to face the human delegation. "Why did you help us? After everything we did, after we mocked your warnings, dismissed your science, treated your ambassador with contempt, why did you come to our rescue?" Admiral Rodriguez stood, her uniform simple and unadorned, her face showing the weariness of someone who had seen too much death. "You misunderstand," she said quietly. "We didn't come to your rescue. By the time we acted, rescue was impossible. Too many had already died. Too many worlds had already burned. We couldn't save the Concordat. We could only end the threat." She paused, looking around the room at the representatives of species that had once ruled the galaxy. "We fought because the Harvesters needed to be stopped. Not for you. We won't pretend we were that noble. We fought because as long as the Harvesters existed, humanity could never be safe. We fought for our children, our grandchildren, for generations of humans who would never know fear of the cycle. You survived because stopping the Harvesters happened to save what was left of your civilizations. That's all." The room was silent. Then the Torvan spoke again. "And now, you have won the greatest victory in galactic history. Your fleet, reduced as it is still the most powerful force in existence. You could claim the galaxy for yourselves. You could demand tribute, territory, submission. No one could stop you. Why haven't you?" Rodriguez smiled slightly, a tired, sad smile. "Because that's not who we are. We didn't spend 30 years building a military to become conquerors. We built it to survive. Now that survival is guaranteed, we have no interest in ruling others. We have enough work rebuilding our own worlds, mourning our own dead, healing our own wounds. She reached into her uniform and pulled out a data chip, which she placed on the table. This contains everything we developed during our 30 years of preparation. Weapons designs, shield technologies, sensor systems, tactical protocols, all of it, free for any species that wants it. Murmurs of shock rippled through the assembly. We're also offering agricultural assistance to any world affected by the harvester attacks, medical aid, engineering support. Whatever we can spare, we will share. The Sirvani representative, a distant relative of Kathira, spoke up. What do you want in return? Nothing. Rodriguez shook her head. We're not interested in trade agreements or alliances or political relationships. We're not interested in rejoining the Concordat or creating a new one. We just want to help rebuild what was lost, and then we want to be left alone to live our lives in peace. That seems impossible to believe, the Sirvani said. Every species in history has sought power when they had the strength to claim it. Then maybe we're different. Rodriguez gathered her materials and prepared to leave. Or maybe we've just seen enough death to know that power isn't worth the cost. Either way, our offer stands. Take it or leave it. She walked out of the assembly, followed by her delegation, leaving behind a room full of beings who had just learned that everything they believed about power, about strength, about the nature of civilization, might be wrong. In the years that followed, humanity kept its word. Human engineers helped rebuild shattered worlds. Human doctors treated the wounded and sick. Human teachers shared knowledge freely, without demanding payment or favors. Human ships patrolled the void, hunting down the last functioning harvester vessels, scattered survivors of the Great Armada that still posed a threat to inhabited space. They asked for nothing. They demanded nothing. They simply helped quietly and efficiently, the same way they had prepared for war, not for glory or recognition, but because it needed to be done. Kathira spent the rest of her life documenting the war and its aftermath. She interviewed survivors from every species, collecting their stories, their memories, their perspectives. She traveled to the site of the final battle and gathered fragments of the Prometheus, which she placed in a memorial she designed herself. On the 10th anniversary of the battle, a monument was unveiled at the exact coordinates where the Harvester Command Nexus had been destroyed. Representatives from every surviving species attended the ceremony. The monument was a simple structure, a pillar of stone from Earth, surrounded by stones from 100 other worlds, all joined together in a spiral that reached toward the stars. On its surface, an inscription in every known language. They came with a warning. They left with a victory. May we never again mistake patience for weakness or silence for surrender. Kathira stood before the monument as the ceremony ended and the dignitaries departed. She thought about Elena Vasquez, who had tried to save a galaxy that did not want to be saved. She thought about Admiral Chen, who had carried his grandmother's burden for his entire life. She thought about Captain Tanaka, who had smiled before flying into the fire. She thought about all the humans she had known, quiet, stubborn, impossible people who had refused to accept that some enemies could not be beaten, some cycles could not be broken, some fates could not be changed. They had been mocked as children. They had been dismissed as primitives. They had been sent away like servants who had spoken out of turn. And they had saved the galaxy anyway. Not for thanks, not for power, not for vindication, just because it needed to be done. Kathira placed her tentacle on the cold stone of the monument and whispered the last words of a species that had proven itself worthy of the stars. Humanity sends its regards. The galaxy had ignored the warning. The galaxy had paid the price. But in the end, against all odds, against all logic, against everything the elder races believed they knew about power and wisdom and strength, humanity had brought the endgame, and they had won.